Good afternoon to you. Mark Sudduth, HurricaneTrack.com, here with your Hurricane Outlook and Discussion for Monday, the 12th of November, 2018. Taking a look at what's happening out there over the last few days. This system has popped up, Invest Area 96L. A lot of people talking about it. It's still hurricane season, so why not? Hurricane season runs from June 1st through November 30th, and yes, that is 6 months out of the year. Half the year we are in hurricane season. Most people, I don't think, realize that or think about it in that context. But yes, until November 30th, at least on the calendar, it is still hurricane season. Of course, you can have development outside of those 6 months. We did this year with Alberto forming at the end of May. And who knows, we might have development in December or January or whatever. It's possible, but the concentration over the last 150 years of record keeping has generally been June through November, and that's why we call it hurricane season, I guess. Makes sense to me anyway. But this is the system. 50% chance of development over the next couple of days, 90% over the next 5 days if we look at the satellite animation of it from the tropicaltidbits.com site. A couple things I want to point out. First of all, rather disorganized. It is a tropical wave, though. There's a tropical wave moving through here. It's rather vigorous, and if it were much earlier in the season, this would probably be well on its way to developing. But it is a tropical wave, so that's heat energy in the atmosphere. Vorticity is there, which I'll show you in just a moment. And the reason I mentioned that this is a tropical wave versus what? Well, versus some upper level system that's working its way down to the surface, one of those subtropical mid-latitude systems. No, this is a true heat source out of the deep tropics, tropical wave of energy. And it's trying to develop, but it's going up against some pretty strong upper level winds, as you can see here. Kind of like if you were to put your head as the passenger in a car going 30, 40 miles per hour or so out the window, and your hair just gets blown back like that. Well, that's what's happening here. We've got some pretty strong winds coming in with this deep trough, or rather sharp trough over here to its west. And I'll show you that in just a moment on the upper level winds map. But it's undergoing some strong shear, and that's keeping it generally in check. That being said, some of the outer parts of this system, a few bands loosely organized of showers with occasional thunderstorms and gusty winds will move across portions of the Northeast Caribbean, affecting areas from Guadeloupe up through St. Bart's over to the U.S. British Virgin Islands and maybe even Puerto Rico. So just keep that in mind. It does not look like much will come of this over the next few days, and it should pass generally the center of it to the north of the islands. But it's a large system, and yes, it could have some influence on the weather down there in the Northeast Caribbean. And we can see the signature right here, the vorticity fingerprint showing up. Not very round in appearance, so it's not bundling the energy too efficiently. Look at this, though. That's really impressive. Very large mid-latitude storm. Well, mid-latitude is way up there in the northern latitudes, for goodness sakes, but that is a powerful, powerful extratropical storm way up in the northern latitudes there to the north and east of Newfoundland. It shows up very well on the vorticity signature here from the University of Wisconsin. This, too, very large area of energy gathering over portions of Texas, Louisiana, Arkansas, Oklahoma, and that'll feed a storm system that'll head up the east coast over the next few days, and then another one after that, which we'll get to in just a moment. Here's the upper level winds that I was alluding to earlier. Pretty sharp, probably even a cutoff low here, and very strong upper level winds blowing across the system, and they're pretty brisk. Probably some of those wind barbs in there. I see 2 or 3 or 4 of them, just depending on which level of the atmosphere. The different colors represent the different layers of the atmosphere here, but generally speaking, the one thing that I see is they're all blowing against the system, and certainly 20, maybe 30 knots or so in some cases. So until that changes, and unless that changes, this won't have much of a chance to develop. The models are just kind of like, not too enthusiastic overall. And really, don't worry about these. Oh my gosh, those are bringing it right through the islands. Those are just bringing what? I mean, I just showed you. There's not much there, so do not worry about it in terms of a big wind and rain and surge machine. That's what we call a hurricane, and this is not showing that. So do not worry. The context here is what's so important. And even though some of these tracks do come through the islands and over Puerto Rico, there's not much to come through. Believe me, I just showed you, all right? So, and you can see it too here on the intensity guidance. Maybe later on down the road, one of the models here tries to strengthen it, but it's all within the tropical storm realm, if that. So do not worry about this in terms of a strong system. But yes, do pay attention to it because it is a large weather system. And yes, it can bring some showers and thunderstorms and locally gusty winds. Understanding exactly what we're dealing with, not just that there's something there. And let me just spend a second or two on this. People see this and they think hurricane's coming, and they get upset about it. And I guess in a year like this, maybe rightfully so. But then understanding, okay, what are we looking at? Well, it's messy, it's November, et cetera, et cetera. We got to definitely keep it in context. If it was September, I'd be a lot more concerned about it. So just keeping it real. We've had plenty to have been worried about already this year, and this is not on that list, trust me. All right, lower 48 weather. We're starting to see the purples and the pinks show up, and that's an indication of winter. All kinds of advisories and winter storm warnings, watches, etc. Cold air, freeze warnings. What is the blue down there? Probably a freeze watch, something like that. Looks like a freeze watch. Yep, freeze watch. See if I can get it lined back up again. And then down here along the Gulf Coast in the warm part of the storm, severe thunderstorm watch, flood watches, etc. And this is important, especially right down here in the areas where Michael impacted it. I'm going to focus on this for the next several months, maybe a year, who knows. And why is that? Well, because we have people down here that have been through literally hell on earth with Hurricane Michael and what it has left behind. People are still struggling just on a day-to-day basis. And when you get severe weather coming through, we need to make sure people are aware of it. First responders are still dealing with things down there, not necessarily in the first responder mode as you would think in the immediate aftermath, but they're helping. Law enforcement, people from all over the country, utility companies, infrastructure, USGS people, weather service folks, Red Cross, church groups. There's people helping, and they're helping the people that went through this, and it's still happening for those folks. So, all around near Mexico Beach and up northwest of there towards Panama City, and then inland to the I-10 corridor near Mariana, and even into southwest Georgia. We just need to keep this in mind. I like seeing the rainfall. That's important here because I'm really worried about what's going to happen when this large swath of forest up here that was devastated dries out. And if we get a drought situation, mainly in the spring and summer months, I guess, that could be a real problem. So the rainfall is good to see, but these little individual storm cells like these guys right here, and they move in, you got people down here that are living in tents, living in buildings that are just still in bad shape. And we just need to make sure people are on top of this. And if you know folks down there, just give them a heads up. It's a stormy time. We knew that was going to be a possibility with the El Niños trying to shape up and do its thing. You're going to get these lows that move across the Gulf, either offshore or up here. And it's going to be a few months of this off and on. And then eventually we're going to get some bitter cold air down there as well. So that's going to be a big focus of mine from here on out. Out west, I wish I could bring you some good news. California is going to stay dry for at least the next week, it looks like. And we need to focus on this as well. Could really use some snowpack in the Sierras, etc. And, of course, the rainfall at the lower elevations. I want to show you this just as a sort of wrap things up. Radar out of San Juan, just kind of illustrating my point. A few scattered little bands of showers and clusters coming in through the islands. U.S. British Virgin Islands looking good for now, but as this system comes through, the large disorganized nature of it will probably mean more heavy rain from time to time and more concentrated amounts. So you folks down there, just keep an eye on that, all right? Especially if you're in small craft, anywhere near these islands, you're going to go offshore. 10, 15 miles, just be aware. Some of those storms that pop up could bring some gusty winds, and you don't want that sailboat knocked over and you're in the drink, so to speak. You got to be careful. All right. So a lot to talk about. I'll be in all week now that we have a tropical system out there. It won't just be, once I get to November, I start to wind things down, especially as I'm working on the documentary, which I'm still plowing away at. So I'll be in tomorrow and the next day until things kind of calm down again, and we'll keep an eye on what's going on. Tomorrow I'll talk more about this late week nor'easter that looks like will be shaping up for the Northeast. The first round of some snow and ice for interior portions of New England, it looks like, and probably somewhat of a foreshadowing of what's to come, especially later in the winter. Looks like February could be a pretty busy month from some of the things that I've seen. It's not like we won't have some big storms between now and then, but more of a backloaded winter where we have a possibility of an active February into March perhaps. But until then, we'll have plenty to keep up with. Still active in the tropics and watching that lower 48 weather. Busy, busy, busy. All right. So that's it from me for today. As always, I appreciate you tuning in. I am Mark Sudduth, HurricaneTrack.com. I'll be back with more for you tomorrow.